Hi, this is a whiteboard review, NET-225, January 28th. We've had some students that have been ill, so we're going to, we usually do this anyway, talk a little bit about VLANs and what we did. We just first introduced it. We're finishing up Chapter 2, which is a lot of work on the switch. Configuring a switch, just to a workstation, and then we configured a switch to a router, and understanding all that happens in the switch. Let's highlight a little bit of that. You know, a switch uses, like this example here, uses MAC addresses to communicate with devices, and this would be on a particular network connected to the router. And then we use the example of another network here where we have an access point, Wi-Fi, and we talked a little bit about the protocol there of connecting there. Say we're referring to 802.11, and over here we have 802.3 or Ethernet. And that would be this scenario here. It would also be how we communicate there. We emphasize the fact that an address in the switch has nothing to do with the switch operating. You can take it out of the box, plug it in, it should work. Now, if you're going to manage the switch, what we did was we created a VLAN 99 the other day in the lab, and then we put all the ports on VLAN 99. By default, it's VLAN 1 that the ports are on. And what we're going to learn is we can divide the ports up into separate VLANs. Okay? So up here the example was, let's say we put these two on an orange VLAN, and then we put a green VLAN over here. We can put a couple ports on the orange, and then we can have, here, let me back up here on that. We can put a couple ports on the orange, and then we can have a green VLAN. And we can have some ports on the green. This is true. They cannot talk to each other inside the switch. The only way they can talk to each other is if you tag, that's what we're talking about here, if you tag the information, send it to the router, which VLAN it was on, the router will route it to the other VLAN, which would be on a different network in this situation, and then send it back with the correct tag for that VLAN. We talk more about that later on. Same thing's true if you have two switches and you want to send information between those two switches. You can create what is known as a trunk. And then when information leaves this switch, for example, let's say we have some orange, when it leaves here, it will go to the orange up here. And if it's green VLAN, these are ports on a different VLAN, then it can only go to the green up here. They cannot cross over unless they use a routing device. Like up here, where we had a router. Now, since this is so popular, this idea, they have created what is known as a multi-layered switch, which operates as a switch, and we say multi-layer, more or less it operates at the data link and also the network layer. So it is also a routing device. So this can route between VLANs, so you could have your greens, and in this case your orange, and in the routing part, it could do that if you wanted to. Alright? So that's a brief introduction. The thing that we talked a little bit about, we talked a little bit more about the internet, and we talked a little bit about hosting things like the student email is hosted off-site, the faculty email is hosted on-site, and we talked a little bit about bandwidth between those two. I think that's it.